Peti washe, tu e Johanna chia pita tonkaska uya makia peye wapahaska uya te tahawahi. Good day, everybody. First, I want to acknowledge the Creator. I want to acknowledge all the leadership here in the room. I want to acknowledge the families and, let them know that our hearts and our prayers are with them, that we want them to know that their families did not pass away for no reason, that we're going to continue to fight for justice, and we're going to try to make sure that there's change implemented across the country because of what happened. Because what happened was preventable if there was resources in place, if there was supports in place. But we see that there's no transition homes, there's no access to culture. And where does that come from? Where does that stem from? It stems from colonization. It stems from these prison institutions that are punitive and that are punishing our people and then send them back to community, because hurt people hurt people. And that's what we see here, this lateral violence. And then now you have the government being able to say they're doing it to themselves. No, we're not doing it to ourselves. This comes from somewhere. Because traditionally, prior to any Europeans or settlers coming to this land of Turtle Island, we had our own governance systems. We had our own tribal policing, and it wasn't called policing. We took care of each other. We had Akichita societies, and those were very important implemented kinship laws that we took care of one another. So this is not traditional to who we are. This comes from colonialism. This comes from settlers coming here and imposing their laws and their systems on our people and our land. And that's why we have to take a look at who owes us, who dismantled our traditional governance systems. The Indian Act. Did we ever consent to the Indian Act? No, the Indian Act was imposed on our people. Did we ever have a Treaty Implementation Act? No, we never had a Treaty Implementation Act. And now we have the TRC calls to action, and everyone's talking about reconciliation. Well, where is the reconciliation? Everyone wants to wear orange shirts on Orange Shirt Day. Well, this is the direct effect of residential schools. This is intergenerational trauma, and this is going to continue happening and rippling in our communities, and it needs to come to an end. And so that's why we need to make sure that provincially, the province is doing their part, and federally, the federals are doing their part to make sure that we are able to revitalize and implement our traditional systems in modern times. And so that our people can feel safe in their communities, and so that we can all take care of one another and work together to build a brighter future, because Canada really harps on being this beautiful country, and it is. But we continue to see these atrocities happening to our people that don't need to happen anymore. And so I just want to say, we stand with the families, we stand with our chiefs, we stand with our people, and that together we'll continue to protect each other and look out for one another. And that's what it means to be First Nation. And that's what it means to come from here. So I thank everybody who's here today, and I thank everybody who's reached out to the community and to the families and was there in the time of need. But it doesn't mean that it happens one day and we forget about it. We're going to continue to advocate, and we're going to continue to work with you, and we're going to continue to utilize all the lawyers and all the support that we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Tarame.
Tini, international memo I was starting. Enough time here. Thank the Creator for giving us a day, beautiful day. I thank the media here this afternoon, right from CBC to the Prince Albert Grand Council Tribune, all the media, and we trust you to put out a good story, a story out there that's going to reach out to the public, right across Canada, internationally, and especially to the governments, both levels of government. Right here in this press conference, you'll see James Smith Cree Nation. Sagastipis and Peter Chapman, and also the Prince Albert Grand Council, the FSIN, and also the AFN in this press conference, just for your information. So the Prince Albert Grand Council, our hearts go out to the family members, to the community, in this difficult three weeks that we had with this Saskatchewan coroner's inquest. To relive that, so that it was hard. So, our hearts go out. Prince Albert Grand Council, is an organization, and James Smith Cree Nation is one of the member nations of the Prince Albert Grand Council. And of course, the Prince Albert Grand Council was there right from the start when this tragedy happened, and throughout that time. Certainly, we like to thank all the first responders at that time. And also, this time with the inquest in these 3 weeks, we've been there to support. That's our role. Support the nations in this difficult time again. Of course, I think the process and the way they did it, with the cultural or the ceremonies, I think that helped a lot, and that's important to note. The recommendations that have come up, that's the purpose of inquest and inquiry. It's to come up with recommendations to make sure, to prevent future events, tragedies like this. So we at the Prince Albert Grand Council still have to look at the recommendations from the jury and also from the coroner. Those recommendations that were there, and a lot of those recommendations went out to the first, I'll say, the RCMP. And those recommendations we will look at, but also to the corrections system with the province, and also with the feds. We will look at those. One very important area, when it comes to people being released, whether it's federal or a provincial, that support system is there. But more importantly, that communication, whatever, from who, the probation officer to the First Nations. The communication, it's very simple to do. And that's something that's very doable. It's just about communication. I just want to say that of course, policing that it's with the province, it's 48, 52%, with 48 with the province and 52 with the federal. When it comes to policing, we've operated through what they call community tripartite agreements all these years, and those CTAs have pretty much failed all of our First Nations. They haven't worked with the funding that's there. The board, the police board that's supposed to be there in the First Nations, that funding has gone out. We've always asked to the federal, to the public safety minister, that we want to co-develop these policing agreements referring to the CTAs. We still want to do that. I think with this on the table and developing something, that's the only way to go. But more importantly, also the funding for making safety communities, that federal funding that's there, that still has to be increased, and we need that, because we need to make community safety plans in our communities, so we don't have this happen in other communities, especially for James Smith. But more importantly, those CTAs were supposed to lead. They're a stepping stone into a self-administered policing. So we support James Smith Cree Nation to start that process, and we ask the government of Canada and government of Saskatchewan to help us out. Don't just say here, this is your responsibility. Put those resource people there that they can help us do the work and put the self-administered policing in our communities. Community safety officers, we need the funding, federal government. Thank you, province of Saskatchewan, for doing this training course. But those people graduate, they come to our communities, there's no funding. We need that funding. it helps for community safety officers in our communities. So a lot of work to be done in our communities. And in closing, again, I'll say that we will look at the recommendations, and we will not stop here. In a year, we'll look at the recommendations. Let's see where we are in those recommendations. And I say to the both levels of government, you know, these recommendations, we like to call them call to action, not just recommendations. Even if you think of for the funding, you know, it's impossible. Make it happen. Make it happen. Call to action. So with that, I thank everybody here for the Prince Albert Grand Council, with the chiefs that I work with, and we will continue to support James Smith Cree Nation, Steve Easton, and also Peter Chapman. Mercy, Joe. Debia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rhonda Blackmore. I'm Assistant Commissioner and Commanding Officer of the RCMP here in Saskatchewan. I'd like to thank Chief Burns and Chief Head and Chief Cameron for inviting us to participate in the media availability today. We do feel it's important that we are here, that we're part of the path forward of working together to move in a positive direction and a better direction for First Nations. When you go back, 150 years, we are the Redcoats, and the Redcoats were there when the treaties were signed. And we were there because our mandate was to protect First Nations people. And that is a very important mandate for us, and we are very much determined to do better than some of the very black marks that we have in our history in the past related to residential schools and our involvement in that. And we're committed to looking at the Inquest recommendations, to improving relationships with James Smith. But at the end of the day, there are 74 First Nations in this province. And today we're speaking about a horrific tragedy that happened at James Smith. But there's other vulnerable First Nation communities in this province that we need to address. And in order to do better, we need two things. One is appropriate funding, and we need human resources to be able to do that. Because while we often talk and examine the reaction to a horrible tragedy such as this, nobody wants this tragedy. The win comes when there is no tragedy, when we don't have victims, when we don't have to look at trying to heal people from horrible incidents. And that's where we want to move to, more of that proactive work, and we need resources to be able to do that. One of the things the Saskatchewan RCMP has implemented is our Indigenous recruiting unit. Self-administered policing is certainly the direction that our First Nations in Saskatchewan want to go. But policing is a very complicated business. It's not something that you do overnight. You don't just create a police force overnight. And we cannot leave that gap in the meantime until self-administered becomes a reality. So our Indigenous recruiting unit has been working very hard to recruit Indigenous people from Saskatchewan to police in Saskatchewan. Our First Nation communities have that understanding of culture and history and appreciation for our First Nations. And that's one of the things we're working on. My preference would be that it was happening faster than it is, but we do have a commitment that this spring there will be an all Indigenous troop going through our training academy here in Saskatchewan. And that is a huge step forward for us, so that we're representative of the people who we police here. It's very important that we're doing that proactive work, that we're meeting the mandate under the community tripartite agreements. The RCMP is not a signatory to those agreements, but we have a great responsibility to deliver on those mandates. And we can't do that if we don't have the funding and human resources to do that. And that's one of the biggest push behind our Indigenous recruiting unit, to make sure that we are representing the populations we police, so that we can work together in a positive way forward and not be sitting here speaking about tragedies, that we can be sitting here and discussing with individuals. Like I've heard stories over the last a few days in speaking with the leadership from James Smith about land-based programs, about cultural programs, to make sure Indigenous people are getting back to those cultural roots, and that the RCMP is part of that. As they move forward in a good way, we want to be part of that. And so, again, I want to extend my condolences and sympathies to all of the victims and families, to the entire James Smith Cree Nation, to all Indigenous people who have been impacted by this tragedy. I extend an incredible, I am in awe of the leadership that we've seen from the chiefs at James Smith, from the other chiefs who have circled around and held these people close as they've worked through these horrible moments that they've had to relive during the inquest. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here today and to work with our First Nation leadership as we move forward in a positive way when it comes to policing in the province of Saskatchewan. Thank you.